Welcome to the Be Meaningful podcast, an unrehearsed, unscripted conversation about a real brand in real time, with Brian and Bogey, the founders of Meaningful, an agency that helps brands find a meaningful place in the world.
In this episode, we talk with Jeremy Soine, CEO of Face Reality, a company that offers clinically proven treatment for acne. The conversation includes the total available market for acne, domestically and globally, as well as weighing the merit of specializing in a niche or broadening to encompass facial skin health in general. Let's dive in.
Shall we jump in, Brian? We like to start off with the question. It's a simple question.
Drum roll.
What's the dream? What's your dream? What's the dream? In terms of business, in terms of the brand, obviously.
Yeah. What's the dream? That's a bit. Yeah, I was going to say that's a big question that could go a lot of different directions. For our business, we treat acne. We're in the skincare category. We treat acne, and we're really good at it. And so, we've got a really innovative, thorough approach. A lot of people don't realize it. Acne is the number one skincare concern in the United States. There'll be at least 50 million people this year that will experience acne. About 85% of people will experience acne at some point in their lives. And it also largely holds true worldwide. And so, when I think about long term, there are hundreds of millions of people, if not more, that need help with something like this. We're in a mental health crisis in this country, and those that experience acne, it's exponentially worse for somebody that experiences acne, and we could, dive into all of that stuff. But, for me, the dream is how can we get people connected so that they can take advantage of getting themselves to a better place if they're interested, both in the U.S. and longer term worldwide. And so it's a big, long one, but I think it has the opportunity to really have a nice impact, not just in the country, but across the world.
So that's interesting, because if you say people who suffer from acne, and I assume it would be like severe acne, however you define that, there's still a lot of growth for you from the sounds of the size of that population. What you just said. My best guess is we're probably, we work through estheticians and dermatologists and plastic surgeon offices and medical spas and things like that. Yeah. We're a really unusual brand because many people may not have heard of Face Reality because we're not sold in Sephora or Ulta. We do a tiny bit of business direct to consumer. We're not on Amazon. And so, we're one of those brands that unless you're seeing somebody in that aesthetic space, you may not have heard of us. And that's a part of the challenge for us is how do you, for a professional brand, how do you create that end consumer awareness and give them the confidence to go work with an esthetician, with a dermatologist and take advantage of the brand. So are you having to work like both a push and a pull? Like you need to push into the providers and the specialists, but you also want to pull and have people say, hey, I heard about this Face Reality.
For sure. Yeah. I kind of think of us as being almost like a B to B to C brand. And, along that path that it all matters. If I had to prioritize one, honestly, it's, we need that B2B group, the estheticians in particular, to be, to have a high level of trust and confidence in us. And so we do a lot, we spend a majority of our marketing budget on that professional channel. But as we get bigger, I also see the opportunity to be able to get all the way to the end customer user. And if you've got somebody there that, has heard of Face Reality, has heard about what we're doing, and we can actually send them to one of those practitioners, then everybody wins. It's funny, Brian, you mentioned this, but, that definition of severity is, it's really different for everybody. You meet that, my daughter's a senior in high school. As soon as she has something, that one pimple that shows up in the wrong place.
I'm not an animal. I'm a human being. Yeah. I know. It's Quasimodo.
Yeah.
It's like, look away. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah, for sure. Well, the reason what's kind of swimming in this is what happens, right? You all of a sudden you look at a brand and you start thinking, and your wheels start spinning, and you start running with ideas. But one of the things that, and it may be premature, but it just seems like, wow, could Face Reality be more as a brand, right? Obviously you have products and stuff, but as a brand, could you be more than a company that creates acne treatment products? And could you be a company that stands for everyone who owns a face? Like, it's like this idea that the face, I mean, there is a poem I learned in grammar school that I remember the end. And I don't know I can't find it online. I can't find it. The AI can't find it.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's crazy, right? And I thought it was E. Cummings or Ogden Nash. It's a very childlike poem. It's really sweet. And it talks about how all the different animals in the animal kingdom have ways to protect themselves. The rhinos have thick skin, the turtle has a shell, the porcupines, all that. And it says, and then there's man with nothing but a little skin to keep his precious insides in. And I thought, that just came to mind when I looked. I'm like, just the idea, like almost skin is a birthright. And so the first thing you're going to go after, I mean, clean skin, healthy skin.
Yeah.
So the first thing you're going to go after is acne, because it's the cruelest assault on the poema, the work of art, the masterpiece that is us.
Yeah,
and so all of a sudden, go ahead.
I really like where you're going with this, and this is why I was so looking forward to talking with you, just because you get into some of these conversations, and I think of all of the brands that you guys work with, and it's so broad, and it's interesting just to be able to occasionally take a step back and say, where can you get those learnings across other industries, other companies, other whatever it is, just to say, and how's that relevant for us? Where do you find that level of creativity to motivate us to have a different, more powerful long-term vision? As a company, and so I like where you're going with that. As I kind of think about, just bringing this into a more practical space for us, how do I think about innovation over time, and how do we grow that? I think long term, having that huge vision is really, really important. What's interesting is that there's remarkably little innovation that's being done on the acne side, yet, in spite of a category where there continues to be such a high level of dissatisfaction and such a high level of emotional distress. I mean, if you have acne, you've got a much higher likelihood of getting bullied, a much higher likelihood of, not going to work, not going to school, not going out with your friends, just really having that much lower self-esteem. And so it's remarkable how few companies are actually seeking to go address it when you've got such a huge opportunity, but all of the innovations happening within anti-aging and the aesthetic space. And I don't know if it's just because you're right. Yeah. It's the dollars.
It's all about, it's the me generation, man.
Right.
Until they die, it's all about them. And
but
I'm
nothing
one.
Nothing is more important. If you think about the impact that those products can have, nothing's more important than that person that has acne. I mean, the results are just, are instantaneous. And, we've actually got clinical studies that show, yes, when somebody gets acne, that emotional place that they get to is much, much harder. But when they improve, you see that emotional and mental health improving also. And I think that's one of the most satisfying things that we do as a company, is to be able to, provide that opportunity. But getting back to your question in terms of how I think of innovation, we as a company have a great reputation of those that know of us for being really good at helping those with acne. We'll get about 90% of those clients that are working with one of those practitioners clear. And it's going to take a few months, might take 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, might even take a little bit longer, but they'll get there. And so we'll get about the same level of success as Accutane without all of the side effects. It's a huge difference between historically in this category, it's the over-the-counter brands, the brands that are sold in retail or direct-to-consumer. They've done a magnificent job of simplifying the category to say, just go use step 1, 2, 3. The problem is it's really harsh and it doesn't work very well for that particular person. But if you can come up with a customized approach for every single person, give them the education that they need, dig into what the actual root cause is. And if you've got somebody that knows skin well, the results can actually be transformative. And so as I think about from a growth standpoint, I think about it as almost like a bullseye, almost like a dartboard. In the middle, we really have to solidify with where we are as a company, that middle around the hard-hitting acne products. But over time, I think that there's opportunities to flex that brand. And some of the areas have surprised me of where we've been able to go. As an example, we launched supplements 2 years ago.
Right.
And a part of healing acne can be healing from the inside. And if you can give them the right supplements to help that from the inside, you can actually expedite those results. I didn't think supplements would work, by the way. I didn't think we, as a brand, had the right to go there, but we went and tried it anyway, and it worked. So some of that, when I think about, what does this mean on the brand side? You got to think about where can you expand and where do you have a right to be and where can you lead that customer base so that it makes sense. And so I kind of think over time, how do we go from those hard-hitting acne products into potentially even, some of the acne safe categories, and it might even spill over into that anti-aging, and it might even be what you're talking about, Brian, in terms of, how do you treat that entire face long term?
Well, when you think of the face it's the eyes are the window of the soul. The face is where you express yourself, you smile, even going into, biblical, it's like when my face meets your face, seek God's face. If I see you, someday we'll see each other again. And this idea of faces is so important because it really is the center of our personality, right? Our persona. I think it's okay to have a mission, and it can be a global humanity scale mission, as long as people can, like in one step, bring it down to, the product,
100%. I mean, I think it's mandatory to have some sort of a mission. And, if you're not providing that North Star, especially for your internal employees on where you're going, how in the world, do you get everybody lined up to row that same direction? I mean, it's absolutely mandatory. It's interesting. When I first got to Face Reality in it was early 2020. My first day was February 1st, 2020.
Oh boy!
And Bogey starts laughing. He's like, "Well, I go for it."
Yeah, March was a great month.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And we had nothing in place. I had met the co-founders in 2019 and really hit it off with them. And one of the things the last couple decades that I've really built my career on is, I'm not a career aesthetics person. I'm not a career skincare person, but I think I can say at this point I'm somebody who has choicefully chosen to work on disruptor brands that are doing something very different in whatever category they're working on, in a way that also works better for that end consumer. And so I was fascinated with what Face Reality was doing, when I first talking to them. But, I talked to the co-founders and I said, well, let me sign an NDA and send over your financials and send over your research and send over your clinicals and send over your strategic plans. And it was like, we don't have any. And they didn't have a mission statement. They didn't have a vision statement. They didn't talk about, company culture or, any of the stuff. But those are some of the things that you have to have long term if you're going to grow and scale, or people are going to be, it's going to be chaos with how you grow the company.
Well, yeah. So I keep wanting to jump because every time you say something, it gives me a thought. But the North Star, what you're talking about, that's that Stephen Covey thing about 67% of people don't know what their company stands for. And so really they're coming to work for a paycheck. So given that, no surprise that hybrid work or work from home is kind of a thing, because why do I got to get up and shave and like not see my kids and commute for 2.5 hours for a paycheck? But if I'm changing healthcare, if I'm making banking more democratic, or if I'm doing something big that on a societal level, then it's different. And the Covey thing was, of course, he did the I don't have it in front of me, but he created an analogy to a soccer team, saying that at the numbers that they were getting on the survey, I mean, half of the people wouldn't know which goal is theirs, who has the ball, and it's that kind of chaos. And so, it's very important internally. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I feel fortunate to work for on that note, a purpose-driven company. And, I think that, that's something I think about a lot is, what excites our employees beyond just showing up for a paycheck. And, to me, that's sort of, the magical thinking that can help, company go from good to great is, when you've got a group of employees that it's bigger than just showing up for a paycheck or hitting this year's sales number. If they feel like they're doing something that matters to them to somehow positively impact the world, it's like a multiplier effect. And so that's something we talk a lot about. I mean, obviously it's a category that it's just a natural for us, so we obviously have a lot of people that have had their own personal story with experiencing acne or whatever it is. But we talk a lot about that. And we talk a lot about just the powerful of a company culture that can support them. And I talk a lot about this with them. I don't know that you can have a truly great long-term company if there's not that shared common purpose and values. I think you can succeed for a shorter amount of time, but long-term, I don't know that that's sustainable longer term.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. God, there's so many thoughts. I can't even think of the next one. No, because it's well, I was going to ask what the origin story is, because you talked about the owners not having certain things, kind of in place, and you were surprised by that. But what is the origin story of it's funny because I've worked for a number of different founder-led businesses, and you've got some of those founders that really have the ability to say, okay, from the very beginning, I'm going to go ideate, I'm going to create something, and here's what the end goal is. I was the chief operating officer of a jerky company years ago called Crave Jerky, and John Sebastiani, the founder, was brilliant at. He was in business school. He went back mid career later on in life. He was training for a marathon, and he said, gosh, I need some sort of a better for you something. And he had a clear vision to say, here's what we're going to go do. With Face Reality, it was just the opposite. And I think that this is way more common with founders, is that it wasn't necessarily something where you said, well, here's my vision from day one. And so for Face Reality, there was an esthetician who started the business, Laura Cooksey, in 2005. It was a career change for her. She had experienced adult acne. She went and saw an esthetician. The esthetician helped to get her clear, and it was almost like the light bulb went on for her. She quit what she was doing. She had worked in the military. She had done some musical things. She had been a masseuse. She went back and got her esthetician license in her mid-30s, and her vision was to go. What success looked like for her was to go establish a standalone acne clinic in San Leandro, California, right next to Oakland. And that was her goal, was to establish an esthetician business that solely focused on acne. She called it Face Reality. Somehow the trademark was available. She said, well, let me snatch it up. And that's the idea. And for her, she got a couple of years into it. She had a business partner, Patrick Romani. It was just the two of them that started the business. He came from a nightclub background of all things. He owned one of the most famous historical nightclubs in the Bay Area. And she said, well, gosh, I'm not really liking these products that I'm using. Let me go work with a contract manufacturer, and I'm going to start making products under the Face Reality brand name.
And then her esthetician friends said, well, gosh, I can see what success you're having. Will you train me? And why don't we just buy your products and we'll resell your products to our customers, our clients. And before she knew it, it became that B to B to C business model of a professional skincare company of what it is today. And, 18 years later, they ended up, selling a portion of the business. They did really, really well. But it's interesting when you take a look at where they started and what has happened since then. This wasn't the vision from day one. It sort of happened over time.
That's interesting. That's really cool. So it sounded like earlier in our conversation, I'm not sure if I heard correctly, you might have intimated or you might have just said outright that that you guys will refer people. Like if people reach out, you can refer them to a specialist because that's the gateway. That's kind of cool to have a referral aspect, on your side of the table.
Historically, professional skincare companies are very good at selling products and working with those professionals to treat their current clients. And, one of the opportunities that I see is as I take a step back and think through what percentage of people have ever actually seen an esthetician. I mean, have you guys been to an esthetician?
No, I have to look it up. I don't even know what their word is.
You're like, what's an esthetician? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, between 15 and 20% of people in the United States have ever seen an esthetician. And, about 5% of the population this year will go see an esthetician. And I've become convinced, spending 6 years in this business, that regardless of what your skincare concern is, rather than taking advice from somebody off of TikTok, go see an esthetician and somebody who actually knows something about skin, because they're going to probably do a much better job at helping guide you into what you need help with, whether it's acne or, circles under the eyes or dark spots or whatever it is. Go get the help of a skincare professional, and you're going to make a lot more progress. And so part of my responsibility that I feel like being a leader in the industry is to say, those are all of our customers that we're selling to. The best service that we could provide for them is certainly to support them, but how can we send them more clients, and how can we generate a level of awareness for what an esthetician even does? And even better, if we can start sending clients to them, right? Then you're talking about really changing the industry. So as we've been able to afford more from a marketing budget standpoint, we're putting a higher percentage of our dollars into end consumer advertising to help generate the awareness for us as a brand, but even more importantly about the importance of going to see an esthetician.
Yeah, I mean, you're really talking about content. I mean, I get my skincare advice from Laura Loomer, but that's just me. But that was a joke, Bogey. Anyway, it's like, earlier you were talking about, that it's a tough time. It's the most influential, the most formative years of your life that you're likely to have acne. And those who get it really bad, it becomes stigmatizing, right? And they get bullied and all that. And so there's so much, it's so charged because of so many reasons, right? And the idea that, I'm going to go online and try to figure out what my problem is. And I'm going to try to find a solution, but I'm going to do it kind of covertly, even no such thing. But we feel like it's covert because, we haven't gone to a specialist. We haven't gone to a doctor. And maybe I can't even afford that, so I'm just dealing with it in my bedroom, trying to find things online. And to find content that says there's a lot of people and it's a real issue and you have an ally and there are people that want to help.
I walked by, I'm going to walk around in Williamsburg. Don't ask what I'm doing in Williamsburg, but I am. I'm walking and then I see this billboard, massive billboard, kind of at a street level. And it looks so cool. It looks like abstract and it's like a product. And I'm like, what is this? I have no idea what this is, right? Turns out it was an ad for The Ordinary, right? Still have no idea what it is. Just walking along. But there's something about like aesthetics and something about you guys have nailed as far as the product. Beautiful. But there's something about
Thank you.
tapping into in this whole editorial look that I think we were able to do for 360. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Brian, but like for 360 Regen, they had an interesting dilemma. Also very similar B2B to C kind of, audience. And just if you go on their homepage and it's just like, I'll screen share real quick. So you should be able to see it. You just look at it and you're just like, what is that? I don't know what that is. I want to know what that is. What is that? And it's as if you can hear the waves. And I don't know, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, that's pretty epic.
So you guys are marketing people and you spend a lot of time, helping brands with things like this. When you see something like that, is it so abstract that, when people see that, do 99% of people dismiss that? Or like, Bo, you're curious because you live in this, marketing agency environment, right? So for you, there's enough curiosity to say, I actually want to go find out what that is. As a brand marketing guy, I would look at that and almost say, gosh, it feels like, does it catch my attention? Yes. But, will people take the time to actually go, not try to understand what that is and what it means for me?
Well, that was a homepage too. So you're coming to the website. You're not stumbling upon it. I mean, you could, I guess, if you did 360 Regen, but who would do that?
Yeah.
So it's really trying to. So there are a couple things going on. So that's regenerative therapy, regenerative medicine. So it's based on exosomes from stem cells. So they do it largely with LSU, and it's harvested from birth mothers. It's post birth, so it's not another way, and so they do the therapy, but it's kind of a semi dubious category because there's a lot of players that are promising the fountain of youth and all this crap. Yeah. And so that's why Be Optimal, again, it wasn't say, you're not gonna, this isn't like steroids where all of a sudden you're gonna get the home run title or anything, but it's being able to reach your best and hold it longer, as opposed to top whatever you've ever been. So it was important. So we had to give it, and we wanted it to be stylish. Well, it was also because you're talking about people that can go in and get treatments, and those people they have a certain amount of money. So there is a fashion aspect, but we didn't want it to look vanity. And we also wanted it to look legitimate and not like, some fly-by-night snake oil kind of thing.
Well, one of the things that, in looking at that, one of the things that I feel like that really touches on just from a macro trend standpoint is the importance of overall wellness. And, with any of these areas that we're looking at, I think that one of the big macro trends right now at the consumer level is they're really seeking overall wellness. Don't just talk to me about this one condition that I might be experiencing today, but if I'm really going to get the help from somebody, whether it's a brand or whether it's a medical provider, help me in my life with how that fits into everything. It ties back to the all of the excitement around the longevity trends and that entire space. But I feel like that's one of the big macro trends that, looking at that ad, it really does tap into, is it really inspires, how can you help me from an overall holistic wellness perspective?
Yeah, and you look at the brand that Rich Roll has become. I mean, he's sitting on boards of like investment companies now. You're like, holy smokes! Yeah.
Do you want to talk, Brian, about like where to at the end of the day, right? What's the very first transaction? Do we want to talk about that a little bit? I think that could be kind of interesting. Because I feel like that's their problem. I think that's kind of the obstacle, and I don't say problem, but as the next obstacle.
Challenge.
And Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll just throw this out there: is you guys have established yourself so well for this one thing that you guys do so well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How do you grow beyond that? And my understanding is, from an outside looking in, is that's your kind of next obstacle. You have these products that you're able to sell online, direct to consumer now, right? You have an online store, right? And so how do you expand that, not only grow an audience, but also expand that brand trust in what you guys do across the product line? Am I off? Tell me.
I like how you're talking through that. And even that word that you just said, that's a word that I think about a lot, is trust. What does that mean for us as a brand? What does it mean for us as a company? What does it mean for us internally as I'm a leader within the company with our employees? That trust is a word that it really resonates with me as I think about leading externally and leading internally. But in terms of growth for us, I feel like you've got to pick, what do you stand for? Because not everybody can go condense that 30-year journey of what Nike did to go from that one running shoe to the behemoth that they are today. And I think the risk is to, you start trying to pull those growth strings too fast. You start risking diluting the brand, and all of a sudden then it's like, well, what do you stand for? The good news for us is, I've really seen some other professional brands, as they have run out of growth opportunities, then they go into retail, and then you're eliminating the benefit that you get out of working with that professional group. And I think it's a huge mistake for brands to get tempted to go get that short-term growth rather than sticking with what has worked for them. And so, the good news for us is I don't think that we're going to be forced to make a decision like that anytime soon. We're still, we're becoming more penetrated in working with estheticians in the United States. We can probably double that level of penetration, I'm guessing.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot of hair products that I've come across, a lot of brands that are in the hair care space that they do that. Then it's like an easy, quick retail, boom, all of a sudden the product is in stores, and then none of the salons want to carry it anymore. It's like, you can get this in any store.
Well, and I think that's a misnomer. I mean, one of those terms that's out there is omnichannel, right? And that's become popular the last 10 to 15 years. And, it sounds good when you say it fast, but actually executing an expansion into one of these other channels without damaging the channel that you're already in this professional space, that is nearly impossible to do, because you're exactly right. It's the same thing with these estheticians that is the hair salons. They want to have that level of exclusivity, so they've got something to provide to their clients or customers or patients that you can't just go buy at Sephora.
Well, I think that's the other thing that's like why you have the ability to double down on branding efforts. I think you really, like, not a lot of, brands would see that as like the next step or like an easy thing to go. For you guys, that's like, this is where we can easily invest in.
Well, so if anything, we've invested more into things like clinical studies to say, as we can afford to do it, how do we spend even more just to prove the scientific, clinically proven benefits at every part of the company, whether it's new products, protocols. And so we're actually spending a lot more on that front, again, to provide that level of trust to those B2B customers and to the B2C customers. You touched on this earlier. You mentioned the D2C side. I actually would prefer that we sold zero through D2C. And here's why is, one of my mantras with, that I talk about a lot is that self-diagnosing in skincare just doesn't work very well. And so that's, kind of that core purpose of why we work with these professionals. And so, we will utilize a D2C site so that we, can help, expand some of that level of awareness. And if you're a part of the 95% of the population this year that's not ready to buy from an esthetician because it's not even in your consideration set, if they're willing to click and buy now and order a cleanser from us, that's an engagement opportunity where we can explain the benefits of actually working with a skincare professional and hopefully convince them to make that leap. But what perfect success would look like for me is if I could convert every single one of our D2C customers and send them to one of those professionals, they'll end up being clients of those professionals for years. But if they buy an acne cleanser once or twice, it's not going to get them what they need, and then we're going to miss expectations. You know what I mean?
Well, there's your headline. There's your headline right there. Self-diagnosis doesn't work.
So we should. I'm listening to him talk and thinking like we got to connect him with our AI agent friend.
Oh gosh.
Because because there's so many ways your messaging on a brand level could expand, because you're talking about the psychological effects of acne, the sociological effects of acne, and all of this can be content that you might not be addressing the blemish, but you're addressing the other problems and wounds and collateral damage. And I think all of that is kind of cool. And the fact when you were saying that you can't buy this stuff D2C, there's an integrity in that. And it has the potential when you can make a statement that makes the landscape binary. You redefine everyone else in the category when you define yourself. So by saying we don't believe you should be able to get this on your own and use it and self-diagnose, we believe you need a specialist. That's how important it is, and that's how all our research tells us that's how it needs to be done. So that's how we're doing it. You're kind of doing like what Apple did way back when they said the computer for the rest of us. That was a line that just took the landscape and goes, whoosh. There's two types, right? And like Volkswagen did drivers wanted, right? On the road of life, there's drivers and passengers and drivers wanted. You're kind of making the landscape binary. And I think there's a lot of integrity in that, because you're kind of putting your pole in the ground, Yeah. And so I think that inherently fosters trust.
And it's a question we like to ask all of our guests is, what keeps you up at night?
Oh man, I feel like this is in the same category as, what's the big dream, right? What keeps me up at night is, as I think about those hundreds of millions of people that are out there that are experiencing acne, that, we're only going to get to them so fast with, word of mouth through our current, practitioners that we're working with. What keeps me up at night is how do we expedite that? How do we get the word out with them faster in a high quality way that they could see that we're not just some other, acne brand that doesn't work very well, quite honestly. How do we get that really unique message out there? Because what we're doing, it's fascinating that, you guys spend a lot of time thinking about other categories. Mm-hmm. As I think about who our competitors are, there's lots of professional skincare companies. Most of them are doing either anti-aging, or they're doing peels, or they're doing hyperpigmentation, or they're not doing acne. They might have a couple SKUs of acne, but we're the only professional brand out there that is only doing acne. And so it's actually remarkable how unique and distinct and this approach that we're taking is. I've actually never worked I've spent an entire career working on disruptor consumer brands. I've never worked in a category where in some ways it's so minimally competitive, which is sort of weird to say. Of course, we're competitors with every acne company out there and every professional. But when you slice and dice it that way, we're extremely unique. And so, how do we get that word out to those hundreds of millions of people across the world to be able to come take advantage of what we're doing? Because there's a massive benefit to being able to get that word out there.
Well, it's funny.
I think only acne too is a powerful message, because that immediately implies, people are going to infer like specialization.
Right. We're the subject matter experts. We're the authority.
Assume efficacy, better efficacy. So, there's something cool about that, because you're not beating around the bush. You're not dabbling. You're not expanding. There's a laser focus, and there's a ton of integrity.
Well, and with where we are in our journey right now, that's why I'm not eager in any time soon to move beyond that. Right? You could move into acne safe and things like that, but why would we move beyond that at this point when that's what we stand for?
So one of the things. Bogey, can I just, before the subject changes, because, I'm sorry, but you're talking about, I'm not sorry, you're talking about getting the word of mouth, expediting word of mouth, I think you were saying. So the one corporate side thing that I did up in Portland, it was for outpatient rehab for PT, physical therapy. And we basically, our client base, it was a SaaS company. They did the clinical and billing software for PT. And it was all independents. There were a couple small enterprise, but most of it, they had independent practitioners. And what they were creating was a de facto enterprise because they had collective intelligence, right? So if within HIPAA, right? But it was like every denial, the learning from that went into the rules engine, so that denial never happened again. And so it was constantly working, because it's a gauntlet trying to get paid for that stuff. And the numbers were insane. What used to take 60 or 90 days was taking like 18 or 21 days to get paid and stuff. Wow. So it was really, really much better. But what we ended up doing was we started to do conferences that these sole practitioners could then meet, because they don't have any time to meet. There's no events for them. And then we started to get them to contribute content for social media. So we kind of raised them to be not influencers, but to be content providers, And so in a way, you've got success stories, and I'm sure it wouldn't take much for people to say, oh, let me tell you my story. And I think there could be something very cool about literally word of mouth, which is, the more digitized and virtual we get, the more important word of mouth, which has always been gold. Now it's platinum and beyond.
Well, I love where you're going with that. There's some analogies, for sure. And, I'll take it even one step further. I think that we can provide, there's probably a ceiling to the level of credibility that we can provide when we're talking about ourselves. And so, even Bo, you were talking about, we like to talk about how cool we are, but it's going to be a lot more effective when you've got somebody independent that's talking about how cool we are, or most importantly, what the impact has been on their business. And so we've done some dabbling on that front with an ambassador program, highlighting the stories of these estheticians that have had not just client success, but business success. There's something there for sure. We've even started doing more on the influencer front. And, that's a fascinating one, because it's more, for a brand like ours, it's a more complicated story than just a pay to play. And I'm sure that we could find people that would be willing to go say nice things about Face Reality, who they've never experienced a pimple in their lives, but they've got huge follower bases. But there's a lot more authenticity if you can, the route that we've chosen to go is to say, let's go work with an influencer and track their journey over many months. And let's see, along the way, let's have them post of what the experience has been working with an esthetician, number one. And then secondly is, bringing along that brand side of it to say, let me share with you the success that, that success that we've had. In fact, we just had a great example of this, that we had an article that came out in Glamour about a month and a half ago, and it highlighted one of our estheticians in New York City, Madalena Conti, that's working with a woman named Amanda Batula that's on a show called Summer House. And she's been on it for 10 seasons or 12 seasons. And she has struggled over the years with acne. And we finally convinced her to go work with one of her estheticians. We'll give it a number of months, and she kind of posts along the way. And it's really cool to see that progression. Well, just like that, the authenticity that's involved with something like that in a way that highlights that esthetician. My hope is that, that in itself, people are going to say, gosh, I've never even thought about working with an esthetician. Maybe I should go down the street and introduce myself to that, that person that's, a couple blocks away.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I was gonna ask you about what does that influencer social program you have? Because I'm assuming you guys have been developing and working through it, especially since that's kind of would be the lowest hanging fruit. That makes sense.
That's an example of what I'll say one of the bigger partnerships that we've had is something like that. we do some things with content creators as well. There's plenty of content creators that are out there that have decent followings, and there's many of them that actually happen to be working with one of our estheticians. If you can frame that up in a way that highlights that content creator and highlights that esthetician that they're working with, at a micro level, that's something that's extremely scalable.
Well, also, and as you get into Gen Z, right, the influencers become more important because every generation becomes less and less mainstream of any type, right? And so right now, like there's somebody recently said, I love the sign. He goes, Gen Z is great at avoiding things they don't want, and so. And I think the influencer thing, there's going to be a bust on that because it's kind of like, it's like podcasts. It's like they're doubling every month, and it's kind of like there's going to be a bust because who's really good and who's really worth it, right? And I think that something will happen.
Who do I trust?
Well, the bubble's going to pop, and what the backside of that is, I don't have a sense yet, but I think, it's cool. Like too, I mean, I don't think you have an app, but Strava-like thing where I can type in my zip code and I can see the 8 or 12 anestheticians like in my area. So it's
right.
And that's not a lot of heavy lifting. That's just scraping some data and presenting it to people so they can go like, oh, I can take the next step if I want.
Right.
Yeah. That's I think that's helpful.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that there's a lot there for sure. And that's an easy one. Going back to the TikTok thing though, TikTok I think has been actually good for skincare professionals from a business standpoint because there's so much bad advice out there. We actually a couple years ago had seen a massive rise in the percentage of clients that are coming in to see one of our estheticians that actually need help getting their skincare barrier healthy, just so that they can start seeing, just so they can start using the active acne ingredients. And so we developed an entire subline around barrier repair that I attribute directly to, a side effect of bad advice on TikTok.
I love that barrier repair. I mean, I love you're kind of creating a space in the care continuum, right? You're kind of defining like that. I mean, I've never heard that, and I immediately understand what you're talking about. And so I think all of that language really cultivates a sense of like not just expertise, but like sage advice, and I think that's
So I agree with you, Bogey. I think at some point here, it's got to shake out on things like on social media to say, at some point there's got to be something where that Gen Z starts pushing back a little bit beyond just the entertainment value, like really, really who actually is giving solid advice out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, there's been this discussion about the Gen Z stare. Right, I don't know if you heard that, but there's talk about it, and the comedians are doing it. All right,
I've got two kids that are Gen Z, but I want to hear more here.
Well, it's just that blank stare where they don't respond, and you're like, "Did you hear me?" And it's kind of like I think if they say anything, they go, "Yeah, no," and then look at their phone, "Yeah, no," and you know what it is? It's like it's not that they don't get what you're saying. It's not that they don't have communication skills. They just looked at you. And sometimes it is the look, the entitlement, but they've heard what you said, and they don't even know where to begin the conversation with you because you're so off base. So they just look and go, yeah, no. And it's a commentary on like it's too much work to even connect.
Well,
and so it's like they're processing things super fast. It's the opposite of what it looks like on the outside. I believe. I think
so
they
that
totally
gives me
get it.
I'm going to have to. So when my kids give me that look, now I've got a totally different opinion on why they're actually giving me the look.
Yeah. So you go like.
Well, there's a level. I'll take it even further. I think my theology on this. I think there's a forced shortcut that happens where it's like, I know what you're going to say, done. And you get written off right away. And so instead of looking at the position of saying, okay, maybe 80% of it I get, but there is 20% there's a gold nugget somewhere in that spiel. They just write off that 20 completely. They're just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's really what's happening psychologically in my theory.
Interesting.
Anyway, we're way off base, but this is good. Thank you, Jeremy, for tolerating us. This is
Bogey Brian, thanks so much for having me. I love these conversations, and I'm honored to be included as a guest here. So fantastic.
Oh, it's great having you, man. It's a topic I hadn't thought much about, but now I am thinking about it. So, all
right, you guys have a personal responsibility. Go see an esthetician and ask for an assessment and
oh man.